Bom, Marcos, vamos começar falando, então, quer começar já a falar do álbum já? Dessa transição? Eu acho legal, né? O que você acha?
Yes, let's talk about the new album, Descent. And Cynthia was already talking to me about this new transition that you guys are having with Descent. Now it's gone from the Catholic dogma. Now it's more a thing related to humanity, and it is kind of interesting that it has been changed a little bit what you guys have been talking about. Like on early records, the target was often Catholic dogma on dissent. It feels like the target is human existence itself and the failure of divine design. Do you feel the band has transitioned from anti-Christianity toward a form of grim Gnosticism?
Yeah, absolutely. In some ways, we still have, that anti-religious sentiment on this record as well, but obviously not as heavy as some of the earlier records where that was kind of our main focus. It was always, we were always, very vocal against, organized and institutionalized religion. And that was a big part of what we wrote about for the first like four or five records. I think we kind of took a step away from that after 9/11, because, obviously, we were here when 9/11 happened. We live in New York, so we were there. We saw it. Bob and I went down to donate supplies to the rescue workers like 2 days after that happened. So we got to see everything like right there in front of us, right after it happened, and it's something that affects you and it stays with you. And I think coming off of that experience and what we saw and what we were feeling led to Unholy Cult. So I think Unholy Cult was probably the first record where we really broadened our lyrical approach and kind of looked at the world as a whole and looked at humanity and humanity's failings, uh, and we've touched on those concepts and ideas on every record since. But I think with Descent, there's a lot more of that. It's heavier on that, and only because I think everybody has the same feeling today. Everybody feels that sense of fear and despair and hopelessness and anger as to what we see happening around the world, and it's very discouraging, and it doesn't put you in a good mindset. So I think uh, the material and lyrics on Descent are very reflective of the time we're living through right now.
Hmm.
But that's the case for every record. Every record I think is a snapshot, in that moment of time where we were, our headspace during that time. Unholy Cult is like the easiest example of that. That's why I mentioned that one because, that's a perfect example of how the zeitgeist of that moment, which was 9/11 and all the craziness that ensued afterwards, and how it really did change the world from that point forward, and we lived through all of that. We got to see how the changes progressed. And we knew what life was like before 9/11. I was born in 1969. So I lived through the 70s. I was a kid who grew up in the 70s, very different time than today,
Hmm.
and the 80s, very different time. It's like two different worlds. It's like, you know, life before and life after. My generation also had one foot in pre-internet era and post-internet era. So that was another thing that I guess shapes our perspective, and how we look at the world and how we see things, and we've been very, very vocal about those horrible changes we've seen. And another example of that would be the Kingdom of Conspiracy album, which was heavily inspired by, Orwell's 1984, which was, I think, written in 1949 or 1950, something I've read in school, in grade school, and something I later read before writing, the lyrics to that record. But at that time, if you remember, we had a lot of, revelations, including this Edward Snowden revelations, where we realized, hey, the government's collecting all this information on us. There's no privacy. There's no, there's nothing is sacred anymore. And this is not really the path we should be going down. So we were very open about that. And we wrote a lot about that on that record. And I think with the subsequent records, we've, expanded on those ideas. And, just by observing the world, we have a ton of inspiration. I don't think anybody today could wake up and look through their news feeds and like I said earlier, and doom scroll without getting that sense of hopelessness. So yes, in a very roundabout answer to your question, yes, we have expanded and kind of veered off the very heavy religious type of lyrics. They're still there, believe me, but just not as heavy with that this time around. Yes.
Well, I will have like a resume of that what you already said because it is a lot. I will do that in Portuguese. Just a
Sorry.
moment.
No, no
Sorry,
problem.
sorry.
It's okay, Ross.
No problem. I'm already used to do translations.
My bad. I got to remember to keep it short and succinct. Sorry.
No problem.
No
It's
problem.
okay.
It was such an amazing answer.
Yes.
Just ele falou que sim, ultimamente eles têm ido mais pro anti-religião. Isso tudo começou quando eles lançaram o álbum Unholy Cult, na época que teve a queda das Torres Gêmeas. Eles são de Nova York, então eles tiveram toda essa. Eles testemunharam, levaram produtos às pessoas que foram resgatadas, auxiliaram pessoas nas ruas. E desde então eles viram que cada álbum foi uma dedicação a uma época. Então é interessante que quando eles lançaram o disco Kingdom Conspiracy, eles também fizeram uma crítica utilizando George Orwell, o livro 1984, que foi lançado nos anos naquela época. Então é muito interessante você ter discos lançados com temáticas sobre a humanidade. Então cada vez menos eles têm utilizado essa coisa anti-religião, que foi mais ou menos os primeiros 5 álbuns, e depois eles se utilizaram mais essa crítica à humanidade mais pra frente. E ele que é dos anos 60, ele nasceu em 1969, então ele passou pelos anos 70 e 80, tudo sobre como a humanidade foi progredindo.
Antes da internet
Então,
e tal,
ou
tudo mais.
degredindo com a internet. Então, é muito interessante.